Welcome to the T-roh Show. Transmitting truth one week at a time.
Welcome to the 52nd broadcast of the T-roh Show. It's your host, Keith.
Hi, this is Stu. Good afternoon.
We had a number 7 special edition last week. It got quite a few hits and interest, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into that particular subject because we've done some more research on it. And some other people have come forward with a master file actually showing where they were, in fact, according to their Internal Revenue master file, doing business in Puerto Rico. Some people were running guns down in South America. They were selling weapons down in South America. Some others selling pharmaceuticals. They're running between the Virgin Islands and Guam, a boat. And so it's out there. It's on the record, and we just got a different way of looking at this. So we wrote a report and put it on the Rain of the Heaven Society post. It's on the first page. I'm going to share screens. We're going to go over the report today. And this report is only about 10 pages long. It didn't. I thought it was going to take me about 2 weeks to do it, but it ended up happening in about a day and a half. So it's an international report on trafficking of persons and human trafficking by the United States. Now, the trafficking of persons, what happens is this is just done on paper, but it actually turns into human trafficking. And so that's the main part of this, when the international record is being tampered with. And it's been going on for a long time, since 1933, I believe. So on the preliminary discovery, it says this investigation has its roots from the initial claim of a secret society known as the Masonic Order, publishing to the world of its claim to a nation status known as the United States. Now, I remember them talking about this, and in some of the history books, they were saying the United States was having a hard time getting recognized as a country. Well, that's probably true. But the fact is that the United States of America already had a treaty with Morocco under the Articles of Confederation. So it's funny how they kind of twist things around a little bit. They make it appear as if under the Articles of Confederation, nobody was recognizing it, and that wasn't true at all. That was recognized fully under the 1781 Articles of Confederation. That was fully recognized by the monarchs and everyone else as being a part of the family of nations. It was this little band of people that were calling themselves the United States that were having issues being recognized. So, that was their problem, right? It says the initial claim came from the year 1789 through a false claim of replacing the existing national government under the Articles of Confederation of 1781, and further falsely claiming that its union is the Union of 1774. It had nothing to do with the original states of the Union. It further claimed that its origins of independence came from a Declaration of Independence of 1776, which it did not. We showed that in the Declaration of Interdependence in 1976, where it says they were operating in parallel. That these people with the United States was operating in parallel with the United States of America.
That's right. It says it plainly, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear. It's the last paragraph, I think.
Mm.
And we have that. We have a copy of that Declaration of Interdependence on the Rain of the Heaven Society post. So they tried to declare the Declaration of Independence of 1776, but it really had nothing to do with the United States at the time. And its postal department, this is what the USPS claims, is that came from Benjamin Franklin, which it did not. Not even close. And he was the first postmaster general of the independent country being formed called the United States of America. This is the name of the original country that was being formed at that time. So it had an uppercase T on it. So whenever you see somebody putting a lowercase t here, it's completely different. It's just a private union type crap that they tried to pull off on the people. And this was the Masonic order that did it, because every one of them that signed that Constitution, first of all, was not in office at the time under the Articles of Confederation, and number two, they did it all in secret. So it'd be the same as somebody today, like in the Democratic or Republican Party, that are out of office, creating a brand new constitution, and then saying, "Oh, okay, by unanimous vote, we changed the national government." Just coming out and saying that, and it was utterly ridiculous back then, and it's utterly ridiculous today. So after looking at all these claims being fed to the international community on a regular basis and daily basis, it says there were many unanswered questions under the fact that there's no law that requires anyone to pay taxes. There's actually still a $50,000 reward for anybody that finds it. And it was in a movie that they had, Freedom to Fascism. And I think it was a 2-hour documentary. But the guy that did it is dead now. Apparently he died of cancer. But he was saying that they couldn't find it, and they did offer the money, and IRS agents were actually going after it, because they said,
Yeah,
"Well, hell,
yeah, I've actually been exposed to those. There's a couple agents on YouTube that have whatever it is, 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute videos where they explain that, they got hired thinking that it was, a righteous thing, and they were helping the cause and all that. And then, over the course of 10 years or 12 years, in their career, they started realizing that, wait a second, there's something wrong here. And they confess to spending a lot of time looking for the actual laws, and there isn't any.
Right, it doesn't exist. So you'd think, that a country would have that. The law simply does not exist, and this fact has been proven without a shadow of doubt. So a country's government is endowed with the right to collect taxes from the people in order to support its international relations on behalf of the people, okay, along with a multitude of responsibilities that they have to take care of. In case somebody wants to travel somewhere, you got to do passports, you got to make agreements with the other country. All these things cost money. So that's where it's supposed to go. Now, due to the fact that there's no law in existence within the United States, and the fact that the deep state spends tax dollars without any accountability or oversight, leads this investigation in a whole other direction. Okay, so there's about 39 agencies under, that may be a very, I can't remember the exact number, but there's a lot of agencies, let's put it that way, under the CIA that operate with impunity through intimidation, blackmail, all these other things, and most of them are civil servants. So they pretty much are running everything, and they just spend money whenever the hell they want. And I think there was supposed to be some kind of audit with the Pentagon, trying to find the 21 trillion. Well, we know where the 21 trillion went. The big mystery's been solved, so we're going to show you where it went, and where all this money is going. All right, so the first part of this investigation is the fact that the United States is not a government. It operates as a federal corporation. So there it is right there. This is the 28 USC code. There it is. So it operates as a federal corporation. Okay, and it's under their definition. So we're not just making things up and saying, hey, you guys operate as this, and it's some big theory, okay? Now, here's some facts. Privately owned corporations do not have any authority to tax people of a country, nor does it have any authority to create laws that would subject the people of a country to its laws.
Right. Just think of like Microsoft or Home Depot. You're going to pay a tax bill from Home Depot?
Right. Imagine getting a tax bill from Home Depot, or saying, here, you need to fill out our 1040 HD, Home Depot. Okay. Imagine that. Well, for what? Well, you got to pay your yearly taxes. You're Home Depot, right? That's what
it.
you're going to say.
Yeah.
So essentially, Home Depot doesn't really owe any taxes either, because since the United States is a federal corporation, why would Home Depot pay taxes to another company? Or any other company pay taxes to another company? It doesn't make any sense. So the United States claims in its Constitution to be the law of the land, when in fact corporations cannot make any such claim and is notwithstanding. That's something the Dutch put in there. They always like to do that. They call it supreme. They use words like supreme. They call it the supreme law of the land. They like to use words unanimous. So it sounds like everybody agrees, when it was only like 5 guys that voted. And how do we know that? Unanimously decided to ratify this Constitution. Well, none of them were in office at the time, and they were all Masons. So, I mean, think about it. They use that unanimously, unanimous consent. And they always use unanimous consent of the Senate. You know, they do that too. They use these terms, and it sounds like everybody goes along with it. And since it sounds like that, people just automatically believe, oh yeah, well yeah, everybody else is going to go do it, so I'm going to do it. You know.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, they're fraudsters from the get-go, but they rely on the fact that people won't pay attention, won't explore, won't investigate, won't enforce.
And 95% of the time, they're right.
Exactly.
They people don't look, you know, they don't pay attention. So the United States claims its citizenship style, which this has basically been corporate citizenship, is what they call it. It's actually, they're trying to pass it off as corporate citizenship. Let's put it that way. To be a U.S. citizen, when in its Constitution it claims the style citizen of the United States. So which is it? One's the opposite of the other. United States is in the front. United States is in the back here. So I can't tell which one's which. Obviously, they're both opposite.
Yeah, and for we've covered this many times, but for folks that are just stopping by for the first or second time, names are critical. McDonald, MC, capital D, and MAC, capital D, are different. They have different family members. They have different family goals, objectives. Names are important. Pay attention.
So the United States claims the following. The U.S. has 5 territories that are permanently inhabited: Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Caribbean Sea, Guam and Northern Mariana Islands, and the Marianas Archipelago, and the Western Northern Pacific Ocean, and the American Samoa and the South Pacific. Those are the territories that they claim. I didn't see anything of the states of the Union. There was no such thing as Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee. Didn't say that. It only said these areas, that these are their territories. They acquired.
And that's right. Excuse me. That's right out of Title 18.
48.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have my glasses on. Is that what it says? 48.
Yeah, Title 48. It's in Title 48, territories and insular possessions. That's what they claim. And here's the link. You can go right there and go look it up yourself. So it's nothing that we are making up. This is what they're saying. I didn't necessarily want to go into this particular part because this is going to be a show within itself. Okay, on how they acquire territory in the through the following means. And it does. It says this chapter shall not apply to land owned in any of the territories by the United States by aliens. Okay, which would require acquire on or before March 3rd, 1887. We have to go into that because you're going to see this down here in 1873. There's a 4-year period in between this. This is a whole different part of history that, but it does show those who would understand, that know the history and everything would read it and understand how they acquire this. Okay, we need an actual special committee just on this one here. We need a committee to put this together just on this area here, because it's unbelievable the things that they have all in these sentences. And it does apply to what we're talking about as far as trafficking of persons is concerned. In my humble opinion, this section here is the vehicle by which they traffic people and grab possessions and territories. But like I said, about an hour discussion on that just alone. So I'm going to go previously acquired lands. This is under, if you want to look it up yourself, it's 48, 1502. It's previously acquired lands, and here's the link right there that you can go take a look. So the U.S. versus Anthony, it says the term resident and citizen of the United States is distinguished from a citizen of one of the several states, and that the former is a special class of citizen created by Congress. So they just created this out of thin air. And okay, why is that important? Okay, why is it says created by Congress? Because the people are the ones that have to create it. That's what a lot of folks don't understand, is a Congress cannot create a citizenship or a class of citizenship. Even the United States and Congress assembled within this government cannot create a class of citizenship. So it becomes what they call a creature of that body, and that's why over here they created this class called U.S. citizen. And since they go ahead.
So what you're saying is people, individuals, come together in assembly, and they determine that they're going to establish an office, or they're going to establish a classification of status.
Identity, yeah, how they want to be identified.
Not a body. An office doesn't have that authority.
Correct. Because, yeah, they can only recognize what the people have created.
Yep.
And that's it. A Congress can't not create a special class of citizen. It doesn't work that way. That's the exact opposite of the way things are supposed to work. It's like putting your pictures on the wall at home and saying that this is your wall and this is where you put your pictures. And then remember that commercial where the old lady stands up and says, "This is not how this works." You remember that? There's a commercial about that. There's an old lady, she's putting pictures on her wall. Okay, that's not how any of that works. So the special class of citizen is a complete fraud, which means there is no such thing as a U.S. citizen. It's a complete fraud. Congress does not have, no Congress in the freaking world has that authority. Okay? In the whole world, nobody does. It has to come from the people. So now there's a part here in the 14th Amendment. People have had a lot of problems. I'm not a citizen of the 14th Amendment and blah, 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 blah. Well, what they don't realize is the 14th Amendment has nothing to do with the states of the Union. With Florida or Georgia or Texas or anybody, that none of those states apply. I'm going to show you why. It says all persons born or naturalized in the United States. Now we're talking about in the United States, and in the United States is what? Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, the Marianas, and American Samoa. Okay, that's the United States. It says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That would be if you were born in the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, the Marianas, and American Samoa. It has nothing to do with the state of Michigan. They're not talking about that there. Okay? And are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Okay? Now, the state they're talking about, everybody thought, oh, well, they're talking about California, Utah, Oregon, Washington. That's what they thought. No, they're talking about Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, Mariana Islands, Marianas, and American Samoa.
They just allow you to think they're talking about.
Yeah, they think that's what they believe. Okay. Now, no state shall make or enforce any law that shall abridge the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States. Okay, they're not talking about Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about these areas here. Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, Northern Marianas, and Marianas, okay, and American Samoa. That's what they're talking about. And there's actually a couple of others in there. Okay, now it says, nor shall any states deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, or deny that any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. Now, why would they have to do this of life, liberty, and property when they wouldn't have to rewrite that if it applied to the states of the Union? Because the states of the Union were supposed to already have a Bill of Rights that secured that right. So why have to write it again under an amendment? It's because the life, liberty, or property, and it was, remember, they changed it to pursuit of happiness in the first part under a so-called Bill of Rights. It's because that didn't apply, or that wasn't in existence in Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Guam, Northern Marianas, and all that. So the 14th Amendment has nothing to do with the states of the Union. So when people were saying, I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen, well, in essence, you're right, but based on this particular, what we're about to show you, in a sense, you're wrong. And we're going to show how that works. Okay, so territory means regards to the United States, the states. There you go. The states would be District of Columbia, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the United States Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands. That's what it is. And this was under the Social Security United States of America Order 1997. Okay, and this was a treaty in dealing with Social Security. And why would you have to have a treaty with the UK dealing with Social Security? Well, there's a map that shows U.S. Virgin Islands, and British Virgin Islands, and they're quite close to each other. Wouldn't you say, Stu?
Yeah.
They're right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the defendants, this is another case. The defendants have correctly stated a well-established principle of law that the government of the United States is foreign to the states of the Union. So obviously, if that's the case, then the term states would not apply to the states of the Union. Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Minnesota doesn't apply there. Under the rule of private international law, that the penal statutes of one sovereignty will not be enforced by another. Okay, and it's very specific. It is universally recognized that foreign jurisdictions will not enforce penal statutes of another state. And then guess what they're going to do? They're going to come back, oh, well, that's federal. Give it a rest, okay? It doesn't make any difference. Folks, just realize that. There is no difference. Well, that's federal law. No, it's not. Okay, because it's federal law making laws for who? U.S. citizens that don't exist. That Congress created on its own, which it didn't have the right to create. So, it is clear that U.S. states are foreign to the states of the Union and therefore operate as a state within a state, and is in clear violation of international law and law of nations. Now, what that does is, I'll show you actually, it's further into this. It says, question, how is the United States offering Social Security, enforcing federal law, claiming voters, claiming U.S. citizens, and a host of other claims if the states of the Union, wherein most Americans were born, are in fact foreign to the United States?
Damn good question.
That's a good question. All right. It's very clear wherein does it read in the Social Security order, or back to the order of 1997, in the territory section of the order, that the states, which would obviously not mean the states of the Union because U.S. states are spelled with a lowercase s. They call it the U.S. state of. The states of the Union are styled state of Utah. That was just an example. They're all styled the same way. And some of them are commonwealths, but there's a difference in the entities. So now, how do we know that? Go back to the original Constitution of the state of Utah. It states state of Utah. in its original constitution. You can't change the name of the state or the style of the state in any way. You can change its government. Its government can turn into whatever they want it to turn into, but they can't change the name of the state and the style. That's violation of international law. It's conquering, blah, 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 blah. So it is obvious that the states would define a claim of sovereignty of territories claimed within the treaty itself. So it is further clear that the term state and states within the 14th Amendment were not referencing the states of the Union. Otherwise, the term states of the Union would have been placed within the 14th Amendment. How do I know that? Because they had to put in their life, liberty, or property in there. Why would they have to restate that if it was already stated within a so-called Bill of Rights? There was no reason to reterm it or put it in there again. So the U.S. citizen claim made by the United States is not a part of its Constitution. The medium of exchange the United States circulates is not recognized by its Constitution. The U.S. Congress is not recognized by its Constitution. There's only supposed to be in its Constitution a Congress of the United States, not a U.S. Congress. No such thing. Doesn't exist. Unless by trust, okay? The U.S. Senate is not recognized by its Constitution. The President of the United States of America is legally non-existent within its Constitution. We've gone over that in the t-roh show before, because there's no oath or affirmation for a President of the United States of America. Even though it states the whole executive power is within a President of the United States of America that does not have an oath and affirmation to that office. We, the people of the United States, are poorly defined. It doesn't specify which one, because you have a pronoun here and not a noun. It is upper and lowercase letters on all the constitutions that they've thrown out there, and it's poorly defined. It doesn't say what particular people. If it was all lowercase letters, you wouldn't have to define it. So, birth certificate not recognized as identification. This is in their laws, so you can go look it up yourself. I have all the links to everything. It says now there's a difference between age, proving your age, and proving identity. Very specific. Okay, so in this same Code of Federal Regulations, which is at the end of this document, by the way, they say that they'll accept the birth certificate as a proof of age. Big difference there here. Pay attention. It says if you apply for an original Social Security number or replacement Social Security card, you're required to submit convincing evidence of your identity. Evidence of identity may consist of a driver's license, identification card, school record, medical record, marriage record, passport, Department of Homeland Security document, or other similar evidence serving to identify you. The evidence must contain sufficient information to identify you, including your name and your age, date of birth, or parents' names, your photograph or physical description. Number two is a birth record is not sufficient evidence to establish identity for these purposes. Why would that be? I'll come back to that. And this is the source right here. You can go read it. Okay, now reviewing birth certificate birth area code. A birth certificate area code has been created, yet it cannot be used as identity to receive a Social Security number. So under these conditions, the people receive a Social Security number when they have signed documents after the issuance of the birth certificate, wherein we can conclude that the Social Security number requires a change in legal status. So you can have a birth certificate, but once you sign one of these documents here, you've changed your status. You just weren't told that your status was changed. The birth certificate is removed as evidence of identity within the regulations. That is where the switch comes. Okay? You can have a birth certificate, you just can't use it as identity. So that's where the change happens. And that's what is specific within this document here as evidence. You have to know and have to pinpoint when the trafficking occurred, the trafficking of your person. The birth certificate is not a trafficking document. It's not a vehicle for that. But when you use it as identity or as a evidence of age, but not identity, that's when it occurs right there. From the birth certificate to these identifying documents, the identity is everything. Your identity is everything. And you're under a fraudulent identity because Congress cannot create a special citizenship. Only the people can do that. Okay, so under their regulations, full wording is also removed from the Social Security application form and does require the applicant to check a box claiming to be a U.S. citizen. Further, the form requires a penalty of perjury clause within it to hide the true intent of the form. So they're gonna shove the liability on you that your person is being trafficked by stating that you signed it under penalty of perjury. So if they ever get accused of being trafficked or trafficking persons, they can turn around and point to the next guy and say, he signed it under penalty of perjury. Ask him. That's how they get out of the liability of trafficking in persons. They try to get out of liability. Now, where are you being trafficked? These are the trust funds in 1321 trust funds. These are the special trust funds. They can traffic you to the Philippines, traffic your person to the Philippines. This is all done on paper. There's also a Puerto Rico Internal Revenue. They're all the same thing. When they have these trusts right here, it's all done through the Internal Revenue because they couldn't get the Internal Revenue through Congress, and they were saying it was unconstitutional at the time, so they had to just shove it offshore into a private trust. And they have a total of 91 trust funds, and the United States acts as trustee. So what do we got here? Go back up here and you're going to see where the U.S. citizen is nothing more than a status placed within a trust, offshore trust under Internal Revenue. So it doesn't exist publicly. And by the way, these Internal Revenue trusts, trust funds and trusts are all under the U.S. Treasury. U.S. Treasury is a part of this. Remember, U.S. Treasury, that's a part of the trust treasury. It has nothing to do with Treasury of the United States or anything else. Okay, so they're not working under this. So the coordination of the United States and Virgin Island income taxes, so they have this whole thing on under special rules. They call them special rules because they're special, relating to the filing of income tax returns and income tax liabilities of individuals described in paragraph A2 of this section. Who's going to go back to paragraph A2, right? Paragraph H of this section and all that, this is a lawyer's trick. This section also provides special rules requiring consistent treatment of business entities in the United States and the United States Virgin Islands. So what's the difference between these two? Nothing. There's no difference between them. It says it's a bona fide resident of the Virgin Islands during the entire taxable year, is a citizen or resident of the United States other than a bona fide resident of the Virgin Islands during the entire taxable year. So guess what, folks? Anyone born within the states of the Union would not qualify as a citizen or resident of the United States, yet the Social Security Administration boasts the following. This is on their page. They have it right here. They have trafficked 450 million persons from the states of the Union and other places to one of these areas here. So they traffic your person from the states of the Union to either Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Marianas, Archipelago, or American Samoa, and the Philippines. Okay? That's where your person was trafficked. Very difficult to take, but it is what it is. Now, here's their code, 22 US. That's their code that defines trafficking victims. What happens if you've been trafficked? Well, this is, this is kind of what it does. The term abuse or threatened abuse of legal process means that the use or threatened use of a law or legal process, whether administrative, civil, or criminal, in any manner or for any purpose for which the law was not designed, in order to exert pressure on another person to cause that person to take some action or refrain from taking some action. That's their definition of trafficking victims protection. Okay? How many times did this happen every day? I mean, seriously, this happens all day long. Now the term, and keep in mind, folks, that your locals and your state guys, they're all trustees for this same trust for the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and Philippines. They're all trustees for that. They're all operating under that. Because the U.S. Congress doesn't operate as the citizens or Congress of the United States. It operates as U.S. Congress. So those are all trust laws. Just keep that in mind. So coercion means threats of serious harm or physical restraint against any person. Every cop does this almost on a daily basis. Any scheme, plan, or pattern intended to cause a person to believe that failure to perform an act would result in serious harm or physical restraint against any person. That happens every day. That's called pain compliance. The abuse or threatened abuse of the legal process, that happens all day long. Then they get into Commercial Sex Act. This happens too, by the way. Now, the term debt bondage, this happens all the time. Means the status or condition of a debtor arising from a pledge by the debtor of his or her personal services or of those of a person under his or her control as a security for debt. That's called a surety. When a court deems you a surety, they just made you they put you in debt bondage. They trafficked your person and put you in debt bondage. If the value of those services as reasonably assessed is not applied towards the liquidation of the debt, or the length and nature of those services are not respectively limited and defined. When is the road going to be paid off? Why do you keep paying road taxes if the road, when is it going to be paid off? When is the national debt going to be paid off? They call it a national debt, but it's only a national debt within the trust. That's how the trust recognizes it. It doesn't mean national, meaning the country and the metes and bounds. It means on paper. So when is it going to be paid off? The term involuntary servitude includes a condition of servitude induced by means of any scheme or plan or pattern intended to cause a person to believe that if a person did not enter into or continue in such condition, that person or another person would suffer serious harm or physical restraint. Okay? So that's just their stuff. There's more to this. If you want to go look, there was the Law Cornell. You can go to that link. All right. The United States, along with the government of the United States the government of United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, used the right to Social Security in Article 22 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this is where it reads: everyone as a member of society has the right to Social Security and is entitled to realization through national effort and international cooperation and in accordance with the organization and resources of each state of the economic, social, and cultural rights indispensable for his dignity and free development of his personality. So they use the right to Social Security to initiate this scheme of removing all the persons from the states of the Union, thereby placing the Masonic lodges into the states of the Union to run the states on behalf of who? That would be the Crown and the Vatican. Now, to implement, this is what they did, using Article 22 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights to implement an international Ponzi scheme created in 1936 with use of the Postal Department to use as a vehicle to traffic the person of every American within the states of the Union, thereby claiming those Americans as a U.S. citizen within that trust, the Internal Revenue Trust, and owing permanent allegiance to the U.S., the trust, without their knowledge or consent. Further, the aforementioned entities used an international scheme of adhesion contracts, that's the 1040, and many others, SS5, and what's that other one? SS4 or something, or 9? Hell, I don't remember. I haven't seen that stuff in 30 years. Okay, international scheme of adhesion contracts to extract the appearance of international consent to bolster its human rights record. So they're selling this U.S. citizen crap to everybody else in the world to make it give an appearance of international consent. But there isn't any. Because you don't know, so you can't give consent to something you don't know about. So the federal adhesion forms were never explained to Americans within the states of the Union, and that their signatures constituted a transfer of citizenship not recognized within the Constitution of the United States, thereby making those Americans stateless. And this is why we claimed a year ago, everyone was stateless. You're a resident alien. You're stateless. Further, the American Bar Association has been arbitrarily prosecuting Americans as U.S. citizens and trafficked persons for denying ever being a U.S. citizen and labeling those trafficked persons as domestic terrorists. That's their sovereign citizen thing. Bench warrants are routinely manufactured in common RICO fashion to create a false record of identity to keep the trafficked person within one of the foreign internal revenue private trusts. That's why they put bench warrants out for you. So that that record stays in place. Because they don't want the rest of the world to know that they've been trafficking in persons for years. It's got an image you got to keep up with. So they use the courts to do that. So this bench warrant scheme is usually done in traffic court on a local level or a district court in an effort to hide evidence of the trafficking in persons from the international community. So further, those same trafficked persons have been sent to prison without due process, under plea of bargain, for many years for not paying taxes, with money not recognized by the Constitution of the United States, and never legally owed to the United States. Trafficking of persons turns into human trafficking when the United States and its political subdivisions in U.S. states force the human being within the states of the Union into a surety status for the trafficked person that on record and in private trust reflects the person is a U.S. citizen, as a U.S. citizen. The purported U.S. citizen has a birth certificate that reads they were born within one of the states of the Union. However, that evidence cannot be used as a form of identity to prove the trafficking in persons international crime. That's intent to hide evidence, folks. Every U.S. attorney is guilty of hiding evidence. The person has to be trafficked in the first instance in order to obtain an identity not recognized by the Constitution of the United States. It is obvious that the Internal Revenue Trusts are in conflict with the Constitution of the United States in order to carry out the international crime of trafficking persons and human trafficking. But yet they're offshore. Coercion by the United States includes but not limited to private trusts in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Internal Revenue, Puerto Rico, Internal Revenue, and the Philippines, Internal Revenue, do not allow anyone within the states of the Union to have access to any of the following basic services if a human being does not consent to their person being trafficked into an aforementioned trust. Stu, you'll know about this. Bank account.
Yep.
Driver's
Indeed.
license. I know about this too. Gainful employment. Housing. Automobile. Credit and loans. Voting. Electricity and all other utilities. Due process. Money. Privacy, or any other basic services not mentioned here. Is this a serious problem? That's called
Big time.
genocide, folks.
Yeah, big time.
That's called genocide. We live this every day. Every case in the United States courts, all the way down to the local level, emanate from one of the aforementioned private trusts styled Internal Revenue. One of them. Doesn't matter which one it is. They have you in all different kinds of stuff. They put them in, they spread them out in different trusts. That's 350 million people they got to spread out there. What do you think is happening to the Muslims? Same thing. They're not coming into the states of the Union on record. They're only coming into the United States on record in one of those areas, in those territories within the Internal Revenue Trust. They're being trafficked, folks. Y'all get it? They're trafficking Muslims. They've been trafficking Mexicans for years.
Exactly. I mean, it's a moneymaker, so that's why you have the border situation the way it is.
Yeah. Everybody gets confused because they're within the states. They go, well, you're in the state of Alabama. Okay. No, you're not. You're in one of the Mariana Islands or Guam or Puerto Rico. You're in one of these Internal Revenue Trusts. Your person is. So all the so-called asylum seekers and refugees and ones coming from Cuba and all that and Puerto Rico, they were all trafficked into one of these Internal Revenue Trusts.
Yeah, in a sense, you could say they're walking into a worse situation.
Yeah, worse than what they had there, because the Internal Revenue Trust went across the pond there and started bombing their country, wiped them out, wiped all their infrastructure out, so that they would be lured into these Internal Revenue Trusts. And Great Britain is involved with it, and Northern Ireland's involved with it.
You got it. That's exactly how it happens every year. Year after year. What's the United States? It's been in like 20 wars in 200 years, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
And we've been in Afghanistan for I don't know how long, but
well, they have.
Yeah, they have. So, yep, exactly.
Well, let's put it this way: their Internal Revenue Trust has.
Right.
And that's why they can do these things without some congressional thing. People now they get that. They can do these things without some kind of congressional declaration of war and all this stuff, because it's all being done privately under a private trust under the rule of private international law. Any private trust that's recorded somewhere else offshore is considered private international law. So that's why they're able to do all this stuff. These are all just trustees that are operating a private trust. That within the private trust, they gave you a status of U.S. citizen, which doesn't exist on paper anywhere else.
Right. And then when you attempt to fight it, if you research and try to step away from it, you get that little list right there on the screen, 1 through 12, thrown at you.
Yeah, that's what happens to you. That's called genocide. So every case involves trafficking of persons. I don't care what court case it is, and I don't care where it is within the states of the Union. Every single case and deals with trafficking of persons because they're operating under this trust, these trusts, plural. Court systems, cops, all of them. Because you made the declaration when you got the driver's license that you were a U.S. citizen within one of the Internal Revenue Trusts. But you weren't told that.
Right. And as you pointed out earlier, all of those forms have affidavits on them.
Absolutely.
So
penalty of perjury affidavits, every one of them. So the rest of the world can't come back and say, hey, you're trafficking persons. Well, the government of the United States of America is saying, hey, you're trafficking in persons. That's it. I don't care about your clauses. I don't think anybody else cares about your penalties of perjury. And I believe there was a statement stated that if anybody knew how the money was set up, do you remember that, John? There'd be a revolution by tomorrow morning. It was a statement that was made by Ford.
Yes, sir. Henry Ford said that if people knew what we're doing, there would be a revolution by morning.
Now, we're going to go a little bit further on what this actually applies and what happens to you on a daily basis. You've been so used to, you've been conditioned to put up with it. So every case involves trafficking of persons and human trafficking. Every person trafficked is held in a privately owned prison called a detention center. That's how they were able to do it. These Internal Revenue offshore trusts own these detention centers. That's how they're able to get this done. So the United States has defined itself internationally as a trafficking of persons and human trafficking federal corporation since its inception in 1787 and has never changed its purpose and mission.
That's great.
United States Social Security Ponzi scheme is directly used to accomplish the following mission. Traffic a person offshore outside of the states of the Union to avoid the limitations of its corporate charter as they pertain to the states of the Union. Directly tax and hold the trafficked person as surety for a perpetual debt, thereby abusing or threatening abuse of law or legal process. Number the trafficked person as a brand of trust property. Because remember, the trust offshore only recognizes you as a social security number. It only recognizes you as a number. Not a human being, not a person, nothing. It only sees you as a number. That's the trust itself. Force the trafficked person into slavery under its 13th Amendment if the human being protests in any way of being identified as a U.S. citizen. The trafficked person is forced to receive a U.S. passport as a U.S. citizen to leave the country, otherwise face perpetual imprisonment within the U.S. The trafficked person is forced to endure full body scans and full body searches to travel by air under the constant accusation of terrorism. Have you ever noticed, folks, that the Patriot Act has only been enforced on U.S. citizens? Think, man, think. All these things are only enforced on U.S. citizens. Trafficked persons are forced to walk through metal detectors in almost every store when they stop for basic items. Go into Walmart, man. You got to walk through freaking radars. Go into the grocery stores, going everywhere else. You're always getting hit with radar. Trafficked persons are forced to go through drug tests, full background checks, and other invasive procedures when applying for gainful employment. Some of them want blood tests. That is dealing with a number, folks. That's property. You understand what I'm saying here? That's property. That's like trying to buy a cow and checking its ears and doing all the stuff that you got to do. Go look up its butt and everything else. What do you think they do when you go through a line in the airport? They're checking in all your privates and everything. Just like a cow. Or just like a dog at a dog show. No different. Because the trust only sees you as a number. And when it does, it looks at you as an asset, and if that asset is destroyed, it looks at the asset as collateral damage. The first one that came out with that was Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of his movies called Collateral Damage. Because the Internal Revenue Trust only sees the people as property and assets of the trust. That's it. Trafficked persons are forced to procure some form of identification, otherwise they cannot receive basic services to survive. Trafficked persons are forced to pay for wars, foreign invasions, warrantless searches, murdered for not following orders. Remember the other day when that guy was in the hallway in the hotel and he didn't follow orders, so they murdered him and it was okay? They didn't murder him, they just wiped out some collateral. So the trust could not indict the police officer for collateral damage. That's within their insurance coverage. This is how sick it is, folks.
It is. I was just thinking that this is just wow.
And
borderline depressing.
It is.
Didn't a lot of this come about when Roosevelt in 32 pledged to all the people?
33. It was May 5th, 33. He made a pledge. Then May 6th, they changed the Trading with the Enemy Act to include U.S. citizens. And so we'll tell you that in a minute what they actually did here. It's messed up because I'm going to show you in a map what they did. So if you don't mind getting the map ready, Stu. It says when the person is trafficked into one of the offshore Internal Revenue Trusts, the person qualifies under the Trading with the Enemy Act of March 6, 1933 within the States of the Union. Therefore, the whole Social Security Ponzi scheme is with the intent to traffic a person. And if you don't believe it's a Ponzi scheme, go look up Forbes. Forbes calls it a Ponzi scheme also. The intent to traffic a person from their country into an offshore trust, Internal Revenue, claim all their property, lease it back to the trafficked person in the form of debt bondage, claim all assets under 31-1322, payments of unclaimed trust fund amounts, and refund amounts erroneously deposited under the classification unclaimed monies of individuals whose whereabouts are unknown, then spend the money and future earnings of the children of the trafficked person without any oversight or controls, which helped form a deep state and a shadow privately owned organization operating with impunity within the United States. Now let's go to the map so people can get a bigger picture of that.
Stand by.
All right. Okay, so down there, that's U.S. Virgin Islands, right?
Yep.
Okay. Are you there?
I'm sorry. Yes, I was muted. Yes,
Okay.
tiny little area relative to the globe.
Okay. And then Puerto Rico's right next to it, right?
Yes, Puerto Rico's here, and then this
Okay.
is Cuba and Florida.
Okay.
Cuba. Go ahead.
So go up to the states. Okay. States of the Union. All right. So that's the states of the Union up there in that area. Okay. Now you sign a document
From here.
Okay. And your person is moved to either the Philippines over in the Oriental, this is an Indonesia area.
That'd be over here.
Yeah. Or into the Puerto Rico Internal Revenue Trust or the U.S. Virgin Islands Internal Revenue Trust. There. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, guess what? You're operating offshore. Okay, so this is
just a close-up of the Virgin Islands.
Okay.
What are considered the Virgin, this little tiny area here is this close-up.
Okay, so St. John, St. Thomas, sounds a lot like Catholic, doesn't it? St. Croix.
Yeah.
Okay, so that we can get a bigger picture, let's go back to the other. All right. So now, up in the states of the Union, you're up there working, you're thinking you're in Tennessee. Okay? Well, I'm a resident of the state of Tennessee, or I'm a resident of Tennessee. Okay? There is no such thing as Tennessee unless it's in the U.S. Virgin Islands or whatever Internal Revenue Trust. It's very difficult to become a resident of the state of Tennessee. Big difference, because that is recognized in its constitution. So you become a resident of Tennessee. You're still a U.S. citizen in one of its territories. And what the trust did under Trading with the Enemy Act of May 6, 1933, a day after everybody was pledged by Roosevelt, which I didn't agree with, by the way. He could basically kiss my butt on that one. Your person is doing business within the states of the Union as an enemy of the states of the Union. So you may be.
This is just so outrageously bizarre. Maybe we should try to. Here, let's do this. Let me correct me when I fall off point here. But the physical body of an individual is here.
Right.
However, the United States runs their paperwork down here.
Right.
Then with the paperwork, they basically enforce over here against the physical body as surety that they're an enemy of this landmass here, the states of the Union. Correct?
Okay, so they're made as surety for any obligation imposed on the Internal Revenue map or the Internal Revenue Trust. So the trustees create an obligation in their minutes, okay? They all meet together, they create an obligation, and they hold all the people in the states of the Union as surety to fulfill that obligation. That's called slavery, okay? Because you're getting orders from people that are behind the scenes, behind the curtain, you don't know who the hell they are. And they come together, and in their minutes, they say, okay, we have a debt here. We're going to hold all the people, U.S. citizens in the states of the Union, as surety for it. And if they don't comply, we will enforce Trading with the Enemy Act against them. It's an enforcement tool. Okay? So essentially, if you're a resident of the state of Tennessee, okay, you're actually considered an enemy under the trust, under the Internal Revenue Trust, an enemy of the state of Tennessee. So you're considered the invading force, which secures the domination of the Masonic Lodge, okay, It secures the domination of the Masonic Lodge within the state of Tennessee that hijacked the state under the authority of the beneficiary of these trusts, which would be who? Pope Francis. And Pope Francis' enforcement goes through the crown, and that's his lawyers that identify and classify all these numbers as what they are. Whether it's an enemy, an enemy combatant, a domestic terrorist, whatever it is. And it's done through, well, the reason why they did it through Great Britain is because that's where the crown is. We're not talking about the Queen. We're talking about the city of London. It's a completely different thing. It's called the crown. That's where you have Rothschild, you know, Warburgs and all those guys.
Yeah, downtown London,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go over this one more time. We can go ahead and end the program because we're going to run along here. But okay, so just so everybody gets it, one time, and I know you can replay the tape and everything, and that's all good and well, but we'll try it one more time. So you have a baby. A baby, I'll explain it a little different way. A baby ends up getting a birth certificate. Okay. Now, the second it gets a social security number, is trafficked to U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, or Philippines, or some other offshore internal revenue trust. Okay. The baby is then classified as the enemy of the States of the Union under Trading with the Enemy Act of 1933, May 6th. So the baby is then held surety for any obligations or future obligations of the trustees of the Internal Revenue Trust under perpetual debt bondage. Even though the birth certificate says that the baby was born within the States of the Union. But that can't be used as identity. So the child, from the second it comes out of the womb, and this is the reason why abortion is allowed, because the Internal Revenue Trust does not recognize life until it takes its first breath.
Yeah, can we jump back? Can we jump back a second? So the birth certificate can't be used as identity because that's a document issued
by one of the states of the Union,
proving that you were born here.
Yes.
Not here.
Right.
So basically, by removing the birth certificate, the individual really has no way of proving to the international community that they were born here.
Right.
Right. That's what we're really saying. They're pulling one of the most critical pieces of evidence out of their process to hide the fact that somebody that's complaining, that they're a State of the Union individual has nothing to. How do you prove it?
Right, and authenticating the birth certificate doesn't do it because that's being authenticated by what? A trustee of the U.S. of the U.S. Internal Revenue Trust.
Right. Whew.
Yeah,
that's a tight operation, I'll tell you.
It's very, very well done and very meticulous to avoid international crimes. But folks, it is an international crime. Regardless, doesn't matter. They can play these games all they want. It doesn't matter. We all know that you were born in the States of the Union. We all know that you should be citizens of the state of. And we all know that this is a load of crap. This is just technicalities. They call them, I like to call them semantics. Now we're just dealing in semantics. But the tables have turned when I say we're dealing in semantics. We know what you're doing. Okay? Now, let me go ahead and share screens. Now, what do you do about all this to reverse it? Well, the government of the United States of America has a website, and it's the General Post Office. And here are all the other folks that decided that they didn't want to, they wanted evidence that they were born within the states of the Union. So what we do is through declaration, which is absolute, you can go over to this section here, which is original resident union resident declaration. That's this right here. You can click that. And it goes through the process by which you declare residency within the United States of America. That's this entity here. The original country within the states of the Union. And what you do then is you start on your American national status. And what binds you back to the states of the Union is your oath or affirmation. So now that trust that Stu was showing you, or the map that it was showing you, we remove that resident declaration, removes your person from that trust. And the General Post Office delivers your person back to the states of the Union. And many, you get a completely different address, you get a NAT code and different format and everything. And this is what we do on a daily basis. I'm gonna have to actually get another map because this one's starting to get bogged down every time I put a new one on there. But look at them all, there's a bunch. It's a bunch of people that have decided that they're tired of this. Okay, so we presented the problem. There's your report. What's going to happen to these trustees? That remains to be seen. That means any court case that they've done or anything that they've been doing is null and void, even on a local level, because they're trying you as a U.S. citizen within that trust. Because the Federal Reserve and the Bank of New York Mellon only funds those offshore trusts. They do not fund the states of the Union. Why? Because their currency isn't recognized in the states of the Union. Thank you for listening to the t-roh Show, 50-second broadcast. We do appreciate the likes, and we do appreciate the subscribers. We just broke 1,000, and with the subject matter that we have, it's amazing that we did, because a lot of it's quite boring to the general population. So we do appreciate all of the subscriptions, and we have not monetized it. We just like the subscriptions. It's just it's a thing. So thanks for listening to the t-roh Show, and we will talk to you next week, hopefully with more evidence that to convince those that just, you know, would like to, what they call keep their head in the sand.
Yeah, well done. Good show.
Thanks for listening.
See you next week.